Welcome to the Positive Persistence Podcast, where ordinary people inspire your extraordinary success. Hey, what's up, family? Our guest today is a transformational leader who has turned personal adversity into powerful advocacy for both discipline and resilience. After experiencing a life-changing moment, he emerged with a renewed sense of purpose, emphasizing the importance of leadership not just in business, but in every aspect of life. He inspires countless individuals to find their strength and embrace personal growth, proving that even the toughest challenges can lead to profound transformation. Drew Norton, welcome to the show.
Ian, thank you. And thanks for that beautiful intro. I received that.
Well, I'm glad it felt good because it's all truth. It's all truth. So, Drew, I know that you and I have already kind of talked about your background, a little bit of your story, but I was hoping that you could share with our viewers and our listeners. Tell us about the traumatic experience that you had with your son.
So and this is a little bit of context. My background was running sales teams, and several years ago, I decided, hey, it's time for a change. Was dreaming for more and bigger, and made a career change in sales. As I made that change, my wife and I was going to be working a couple hours from home. We got an apartment. We weren't sure, hey, is this going to be the thing? Let's get the apartment and let's not fully commit. Let's dip our toe in the water and make sure this is a good thing before we go all the way. So my wife and kids would sometimes come down and stay with me at my apartment several days out of the week. One day I'm wrapping up some sales meetings and I call my wife and I say, hey, you know what? I'm going to be home in about 10 or 15 minutes. Why don't you get the kids ready at the apartment? We'll head the trek home and get back and spend some time at home. And as I pulled into the apartments that day, I remember very vividly as I turn in and I'm driving down the fence line, seeing an ambulance coming the opposite way with the sirens blaring. And I pulled up to our apartment. As I opened the door, my heart sank. Everything seemed to slow down for a minute. My wife was crying in tears. I knew something was wrong. She was kneeling over our 6-month-old son. He was barely breathing. I could tell something was wrong with him. It seemed like, just moments later, the paramedics were kind of pushing me out of the way to run in, and they loaded up my wife and my son into the ambulance and drove off. And the next 6 to 8 weeks were very agonizing for us and for our family. Hospital tests were ran. At first, he was diagnosed with a heart condition. It turned out to be a misdiagnosis, but for the next 6 or 8 weeks, we thought at any moment this could happen again, and maybe our wouldn't be there. The good news at the end of 8 weeks it was a misdiagnosis. What had happened and what we believe after we've kind of pieced things together is we knew he'd had a hernia at the time. He was in one of those portable pack and plays, portable cribs, and a slab broken in that pack and play. And what we believe happened is that he rolled over, got his face. He was face down in that position on the pack and play. My wife believes he just got his head stuck and couldn't lift it up because of the hernia. And had suffocated to death. When she picked him up out of the crib, he wasn't responsive. He wasn't breathing. There's a lot of miracles I could dive into about that day. I mean, just months before on Instagram, she'd been watching a mom that taught you how to do CPR to infants. So that immediately popped in her brain. She did CPR. She saved his life, resuscitated him. But that's just not an experience any mom should ever have to go through. We're so grateful. He's alive. He's 7. He just turned 7 years old this year. He's happy and healthy.
That's great.
Really, and thank you. It was really difficult on my wife. A lot of stress, a lot of judgment, a lot of guilt that wasn't even hers that she felt about all of that. And it was about 1.5 to 2 years before she felt like she was back to normal. But what I realized going through that time is I had 6 months earlier decided to make a change in my job, and I thought it was for money and for success, and those things came. But I had gone all in on myself when I made that career change because I was going from salary and commission to all commission. It's like, we've got to make this work. So I invested in me and in courses and books and training and doubled down on myself for the first time in probably 10 years. And I noticed through that year and a half, my wife and I had some of the best conversations we ever had around that incident. I helped her process what she was feeling, talk through things. And I don't say this to make myself the hero of the story. My wife, she's the hero. She saved our son's life. And I realized all the work I was doing on me was making me a better husband and father, even though I thought it was for my job and for my work. And I've just come to realize often as people and as men, we don't spend enough time working on ourselves day to day. And that led to just several other great things in my life. Eventually went on to lead the company I was working for as their top sales rep. I was doing millions a year in sales revenue, built teams that were doing over $20 million a year in revenue. I lost 100 pounds, all from just realizing the more I work on me, the more it blesses not just my life, but the life of my family and those around me.
That's amazing. I mean, it's such a tragic event. Like you said, no parent ever wants to have to go through probably their worst nightmare. But you were able to, like you said, deal with that situation because of some of the skills that you had built 6 months prior. So let's talk about leadership. Let's talk about discipline, and let's talk about how those skills, like you said, you were doubling down on basically pouring into yourself, working on yourself. What were some of the things that you learned that helped you transform, I guess, maybe your perspective on things to help you deal with that situation, help your wife deal with that tragic situation as well?
I think the biggest takeaway I had is, as I've looked back to that time, I kind of alluded to the fact that I thought I was making this change to make more money and to have more success in my personal career. I've also come to realize if that happened 6 months earlier, I wasn't the husband or father my wife needed for her at that time. There was a lot of work I'd been doing on me that led up to that helped me lead in a better way. And so I co-host a podcast called The Everyday Leader. And we often on that podcast talk about the importance of before you lead others, you've got to lead yourself. And just saw that principle apply, not just there, but over and over again in my life and the life of others after that event, that because I was leading me in a lot of ways, it allowed me to show up and lead my family when they needed that from me.
What strategies do you think that you learned or did you use to ensure that, well, I guess you didn't know at the time. I was going to say to ensure that you were ready to support your family, but what strategies did you employ that helped you support your family during that crisis?
So some of it more directly was I was learning to communicate better with my spouse. So my background being in sales, I've always been fascinated with how to say something better, how to listen, how to understand what someone really means, how to repeat things back. I mean, I remember at the time I had read over and over again, one of my favorite books is Never Split the Difference by Chris Voss. It's not even really a sales book. It's a book on negotiation, which I would argue is sales. I just realized, as my wife would say, naturally taking the things I learn in my sales situations every day and applying it to her. And that was allowing her to process things, speak back things. He talks about some simple things like mirroring, where you repeat back what somebody says, labeling somebody's emotions, the use of specific questions. I saw all of that. On the flip side, what I also see, one of the frameworks we teach, co-own the Abundant Man Project, and we teach a simple framework of identity, purpose, and battle plan. And so the idea of that is, what do you believe about yourself? What are the things you want or feel called to do? And then what's your plan to move forward with that? And I saw a lot of that time, a lot of that growth came because I believed a little bit more in myself. I believed, hey, I think I can do something that maybe previously I didn't think I could do. And that belief was often the belief in me was often the first step to improvement and growth in my life.
Let's talk about that for a second. Let's talk about, believing in yourself and how that can affect your identity. Why is it important to be solid in your identity, who you feel you are? Why do you feel that's an important piece of self-leadership?
Yeah, what you believe about yourself impacts almost every single decision you make day to day. And so, for example, if I wake up and I believe I'm lazy and I don't have time, the odds of me getting to the gym become very slim. Where there have been days where it's 11 o'clock at night, and because I've chosen to believe, hey, I'm someone who's, and this is the exact words I say to myself every day, I'm healthy, fit, active, and strong. Like if it's 11 o'clock and I haven't got the workout in, you'll find me at the gym. Most nights it's not that way. I'm usually working out a lot earlier in the day. But because I just have that belief that's who I am, the friction from the doing is much less, because I'm just being the person I tell myself I am day to day. And that belief is really where it starts. So a lot of times I see people trying to do actions that don't align with what they believe, and it's burning them out because they're living, they have like a misalignment with their identity, the actions of what they're doing and what they believe about themselves.
If you could, can you paint a picture of what you mean by that their actions don't align with what they believe?
I'm just going to use things that are familiar to me, and hopefully this will relate to some of your audience. But having a background in sales, for example, if I have a new sales rep who doesn't believe he can make a sale or doesn't believe there are people out there who want his product or service, or even a business owner, why would I pick up the phone and make some calls? And if I do, and I'm just doing it because that's what my boss or my manager or what someone told me I have to do, but the whole time I'm believing the opposite, like I'm just going to have this internal conflict inside me. In fact, there's a word for it called cognitive dissonance, which is this idea that like our brain, it looks to align our actions with our beliefs. And when our action and our beliefs don't line up, we feel something that's not good inside of us as those things are misaligned.
How were you able to align yourself? Let's just go back to the physical, because I believe that the easiest wins that anybody can make are physical ones. How did you go from shifting your mindset to going from the guy who was 100 pounds heavier to the guy that's 100 pounds lighter? Like, did the guy 100 pounds ago feel that he was healthy, active, and strong? Was that the belief, or did you have to change your belief in order for you to start taking the actions to get you to where you are now?
I had to change that, absolutely. Now, that belief actually had several stages to it for me personally. Part of that was I had a brother that did the carnivore diet and had a ton of success. And I actually don't recommend the carnivore diet for most people. It's kind of extreme. But I thought, hey, I love meat and I could eat as much as I want. I'll try that.
Sounds good.
But,
sign me up.
Yeah. I was like, oh, bacon and eggs every morning and a steak for lunch. Like this, I could do that. And as a big guy, it was like, yeah, I totally could do that. And I'm also a simple guy. So I don't enjoy cooking. My wife's been the one who's always handled that. So I just had this belief that I could do that. I don't know if I can run every day and get a workout routine and track my macros. I could do that. That literally started with a belief. To shorten the story, probably lost about 60 pounds doing that. And then would kind of yo-yo over the next year or so between going carnivore, keto, introducing things back, seeing my weight go up. And I was yo-yoing up and down. Eventually I hired a trainer. He helped me dial some things in further. But the biggest thing that happened along that way, one other thing, I had a friend who invited me to the gym. So I started going to the gym. And so about 40, 50 of that pounds was just changing my diet. I start going to the gym, and I have another phrase I like to say, belong, believe, become. When you feel like you belong to something, you believe more in yourself, or when you see someone do something, you believe in yourself, and that allows you to become something greater. And so at one point, I had a coach I was working with. He's a great friend of mine. He actually co-hosts the podcast with me. And as he was helping me work through some limiting beliefs about my health, I came up with that phrase, I'm healthy, fit, active, and strong. And as I started saying that to myself, it's really interesting. I go back, I've worn a Fitbit for years. My step count doubled basically overnight around the time I started saying that to myself. And so it went from a belief, it went from, creating some small habits and adding some habits on over time. And what's made it stick and change is it's become who I am, and it's become a lifestyle for me. I hate the word diet, because often diet means you're just doing it temporarily and you're going to go back to eating a certain way. And so,
Drew, you are speaking my language. I've said that so many times to clients, like diet. I hate that word, because a diet means it begins and it ends.
Yeah.
You're right.
And there's layers to it. Like what I'm doing now would have been overwhelming to me months ago. I track my macros and my calories. I've gotten blood work done. I'm taking supplements. So it's evolved and progressed over time. I'm working out typically 5 or 6 days a week. Little belief and just little changes and starting to speak to myself differently And that's the only way I've been able to find I can change the beliefs I have is it starts with an external verbal communication with myself.
I love the fact that you talked about the small little changes because I truly believe that your habits are going to eventually be the indicator of whether the actions you take are going to lead you to success or not. Right. And I think that a lot of times that we get caught up in the big picture, which is important to have, but we're always focused on that end goal and we're not focused on taking those small steps, which we know when we stack those small wins over time, they turn into those big ones. But as you're telling your story, I'm thinking that your small habit changes over a long period of time really help change your belief in yourself and what you could achieve, which then changed your identity, which then reinforced the habits you were taking to, again, get you to where you want to be. So it's a cyclical circle that feeds into itself, but it all starts with that small habit change in the beginning, which I love that. And then you talked about identity, purpose, battle plan, and just going along with this theme that we're talking about now, like how did your purpose change when you started to really stick to these habits over time?
Yeah, I would say my purpose has become very aligned with the mission of AMP, the Abundant Man Project. Our mission is we inspire men to be abundant and amplify their God-given potential. I think the purpose can come a couple different ways. For some people, it's, what is it I truly want and deciding it's okay to actually want that and move forward with it. For others, sometimes it's feeling this calling, this thing that's, these are my natural strengths and God-given abilities, and I want to go serve people with what I have. And so for me, as you get clear on your identity, it seems like that calling is easier to be revealed, or that purpose is easier to find. And I just recognized sales has been my background, and I love sales. But what I really loved was working with the men and women and helping them learn a skill set and helping them progress in their life. And often, as I kind of got away from leading sales teams and started coaching business owners and individuals one-on-one and working with teams, I realized, hey, often the work I'm doing, even though I started off, like I got into it to be a sales trainer, and I'm like, half the time a business hires me or the owner hires me and we're not even working on sales, we're just working on him. and I just realized for me, like that lights me up. And I've also recognized at times in my life, I like to say, put the purpose before the process. Sometimes it's, hey, what is the end goal and what is it I want? And if you can get that why or get what you want in alignment with who you are, sometimes it makes the processes you're doing day to day, it's easier to understand this is why I'm doing it because it's getting me where I want to go. Or it sometimes helps you realize I can eliminate some of these things in my life. They aren't in alignment with what I want or the purpose that I have or who I say that I am.
What do you tell individuals who may have found their calling, or they feel like they have found their purpose, they're in alignment with their identity, but in order for them to make that transformation, they need to get rid of their limiting beliefs? So going back to a phrase that you used earlier, how do you get that person to get past their limiting beliefs so they can make that transformation into their new identity and start to fulfill their purpose?
Great question, Ian. And I wish it was we just wave a magic wand and those beliefs go away and
right.
New ones appear that replace it.
Yeah.
No, there's a process. There's a process to it. There's another coach that does a lot of work on identity. There's a book written about him, Steve Hardison, the ultimate coach. And he talks about the problem with affirmations is it's usually frosting over dog crap. Sometimes we've got to start with like, what's the belief we have that's untrue about us and start with that. Sometimes it's just taking a minute to, hey, if I go quiet, what are all the things I hear myself think about myself? Or when I go to do something big or in my mind that's scary, what comes up for me? One question I love to ask people is if I walked into a room and all my family and friends were in there and I could tell they were talking about me and they all kind of quieted down as I walked in, what is it I imagine they were saying about me that they went hush hush about? Whether or not it's really true, but like, what are those thoughts that come up? And then from there, it's like, okay, we've got to identify what these thoughts are. we call this the language of leadership, but it's acknowledge, ask questions, and agree. So we acknowledge what the feeling, what the emotion is, what the limiting belief is. I think it's really good to get curious instead of beating ourselves up for it. It's like, hey, that's just what we think. That's the programming in our mind. That's the thing your grandma said to you when you were 6 years old that she said once and you've just carried it the rest of your life. Let's get curious about it, where that shows up in our life. Let's make some new agreements of how we're going to move forward, and then create some powerful statements that will replace that limiting belief.
If you're listening to this, there's a good chance you're what I call a sidelined achiever. You know you're capable of more, but right now you feel stuck, a setback, or like life has benched you. And maybe it was an injury, a diagnosis, a layoff, a failed business, or maybe even a broken relationship. Something knocked you off your path and left you wondering, what now? How do I even start moving forward again? You're fed up feeling this way, but you don't have a clear roadmap out. Here's what I want you to hear. You are not broken. You are not done. You are not disqualified. You're just sidelined. And sidelines are where legendary comebacks are built. And that's exactly why I created the Rinse Method. It's a framework I used to go from being told I'd never run again to crossing a marathon finish line. Rinse is a simple, repeatable process that helps you build real daily resilience. Turn adversity into momentum, tap into the strength you already have, and hold yourself capable doing what once felt impossible. If you're tired of being stuck and you're ready to create your comeback, not someday, but starting now, head over to watchmemindset.com. You know, one of the things that we talk about at Positive Persistence is when we're dealing with those limiting beliefs and we're able to, like you said, be quiet and listen and acknowledge and notice what those limiting beliefs are, you can find out where they're coming from, like you had mentioned. But then we follow with like that question. And one powerful question is, what evidence do I have of this? Right? When I think that I'm going to fail because I'm not good at XYZ, what evidence is there truly that I'm not good at this?
Right? I'm going to steal that from you.
Yeah. Yes. I mean, it's so important because Les Brown, who is, a mentor from afar of mine, he says fear stands for false evidence appearing real, right? I'm sure that's been said all over the world, but that's so true. When we start to doubt ourselves, when we start to have those limiting beliefs, they may be external. Like you said, grandma said something to you 6 years, when you're 6 years old, or they may be just internal from things that you may have failed on before in the past. But that doesn't mean that's going to be your future. Doesn't mean it has to be your present. And when we start to ask ourselves, what real evidence do I have that I'm not going to succeed, or I'm not going to be good at this, or whatever it is, then I think we can start to peel back those layers and figure out that, well, it is just here. And you need to change those thought patterns.
And I think it's powerful when you can recognize that voice you hear isn't even you. Like it's just the programming and your brain that's trying to keep you safe that comes up with those things, being able to separate that first off. And then sometimes it's like you think those things all the time to yourself. And if you say them out loud, you like realize how ridiculous that thought you're having. Like I have thought things about myself that's worse than anyone has ever said to me in my life. I'm a terrible husband. I'm an awful father. Things that aren't necessarily true, but they pop up in my mind. And sometimes when you just write those out or say them out loud, it's almost a relief just doing that, because you're like, this is kind of ridiculous that I think this way or think this way about myself all the time.
Yeah, we typically usually are our harshest critic. That's for sure. Now, Drew, in your experience, when we're talking about leadership, now I know that you talk about leadership being a choice and not just a title. How would you say that individuals can recognize that leadership is actually a choice, and having the title leader doesn't necessarily mean you're a good one?
I believe there's a difference between leadership and management, and I think both are necessary. I think sometimes we think because of somebody's title or their position in an organization or ownership of a company, that automatically makes them a leader. I think they have the responsibility of that often with that title or role. It's a choice to show up and lead others. At the same time, just because I'm low man on the totem pole, I'm the newest guy on the team, I'm not the one leading the organization, I can lead somebody else. I can help somebody, see something they can't see on their own, or speak powerfully to them so they believe in themselves and do something they didn't think they could do previously. When we say it's a choice, it's that simple. It is a choice to show up and be a leader. And it's usually not something you can do passively. It usually takes intentionality to lead yourself and to lead others. And like I said, management, there's a place for it. And I've always loved, I think there's several people who talk about this, but the idea of like, you want to lead people and manage systems and processes. And there's a difference between those two things. So it very much is like, I make a choice every day when I show up. Am I going to lead myself? Am I going to lead someone else or not?
Sounds so simple. Right.
Yeah.
But it's not easy.
Nope.
Right.
Right. Correct.
So I know that when we talked before, we were talking about the quote unquote work-life balance, which neither of us really believe that there is such a thing in work-life balance. But I know that you teach 5 pillars that prioritize all aspects of life. And I was hoping you could unpack those 5 pillars for us.
If there's a 5th one, I've forgotten what it is, but the 4, the 4 that we have are faith, family, fitness, and finance. My experience, if you're not happy with your life, I would start by looking at one of those 4. Is there something off in one of those areas? Now, are there some other areas that you maybe would categorize outside of those 4? Sure, but I feel like there's most things I can put into one of those 4 categories. To your point, I don't believe in balance, and I also believe you can succeed in all those areas at the same time. That it doesn't necessarily mean I have to trade off one to have success in the other. Now, my time devoted to each might be different in different seasons of my life. And yeah, I found often it's the priority and the intention that's important, not the amount of balance in my life.
Mm-hmm. Priority, intention, and attention at that particular time. Yeah. Sure.
Just this last week, we launched our first in-person men's retreat called AMP Awakening. It was a great event, great experience. My family didn't see me much this last week. Like I was heads down preparing for this event. My birthday was in the middle of the week. And so we kind of skipped celebrating my birthday because I was like, I'm so busy, dear. Let's not worry about it. But she celebrated me when I got home, and the next day I took my boys out fishing. And so even though the whole week wasn't balanced, my family got some really, really intentional time.
I don't know, that word gets overused, but I mean, how you describe it is right. Like where you are going to put your intention, that needs to have your attention at that point in time. Once you're done with that, let's say, then you move on to another pillar, as you imagine, whether it be family, faith, whatever it is. But that, I guess that always oscillates, right? Like what you're focused on, that's the seesaw of balance, I guess. Now, we also talked about the prioritizing purpose over the grind, right? So I was hoping you could also elaborate on this, like how prioritizing purpose over the grind can actually prevent burnout and lead to a more fulfilling life. But I think a lot of us get caught up in, I need to wake up earlier, I need to work harder, I need to do all the things, whether that is being a good parent, being a good employee, running a business, being a good boss, whatever it is, we feel like always doing more is the thing that we need to do.
I speak from being on both sides of that. Like there have been times of my life where I've gone into that grind. And I think there's seasons where some of that is necessary, where it's like you're going to do something big, something that requires a lot of you. It's going to take extra attention, focus, work, effort. And I've also come to recognize there's times in my life where chasing something has just led to me saying, I'm going to be happy when I get to X, or I'm going to be happy when we get to Y, or I'm going to spend more time with my family after I accomplish this thing I'm building for my family. And it's easy to get lost in that pursuit. I've found, often what I can really do instead is I can put the purpose in the middle of what I'm doing every day. Like instead of focusing on, hey, I would much rather spend time with my family and have them feel like they're a priority to me now than to spend the next 10 years saying, oh, dad said he was going to do something for us someday, even though he built this great life or money or freedom because of it. And I've just found that it's often less about where you're going and more about what you're experiencing along the way and being attentive to that.
Yeah. I have been myself caught up in the head down, working crazy hours because I was using the reasoning in my head that I was doing it for my family. But I was doing them a disservice because I was taking myself away from them to build a business that was supposed to help support them financially, but I wasn't supporting them emotionally. That came back to bite me, and that's a hard lesson to learn.
As I talked about having that success with the sales teams I was leading, there came a point where it's like, man, I'm crushing it in our company. I'm leading the way, I'm getting the recognition, but I miss all my kids' games and plays, and I'm not available on the weekends. And my wife feels like she's got to schedule lunch with me just to see me. And I started to realize, hey, I can structure my life a little bit different where I can still have the success and still help them feel like they're getting prioritized. Doesn't mean it's this perfect balance like we've been talking about, but I can be way more intentional. My kids often are happy with 30 minutes of focused dad more than they are of 8 hours of distracted dad. So I can be really intentional with my time and be part of my family. And there's days where it is 8 hours of focused dad, and there's days where it's like, hey, it's going to be 30 minutes before bed, but you're going to get some of dad's attention, and he's going to set the phone aside for a little bit.
Yeah, it's all it takes is a couple of minutes just to make somebody feel significant, which could make a real change. Now, you said something, Drew, earlier about the language of leadership and the 3 A's. And I was hoping, let's circle back to that: acknowledge, ask, and agreements, and why that's important. And could you put that in like a real life scenario where that framework is actually transformed, maybe an interaction of yours?
When I say we, I'm referring to Matt, who co-hosts the podcast. We've both done a lot of work with teams, and we've found that language works really well when you've got to have a discussion with something about things that aren't going the way you want or things that aren't working properly. So that's kind of where it started. And we've also realized it doesn't apply just to conversations with others. Sometimes it's taking a look at your own life. But if I had to apply this to a situation, let's say I have an employee that's maybe not meeting the standard we've set. Maybe they're showing up late every day. It'd start by saying, hey, look, I want to have a conversation with you. And you could use the word acknowledge. You don't necessarily have to. I want to acknowledge that you're showing up late every day, 15 minutes late. I've also found instead of labeling the person, it's like, let's just talk about what is and isn't working. So I want to acknowledge you're showing up every day, and that doesn't work for our team. And then often asking some questions and just being curious instead of just like berating a person and beating them up for what they're not doing. It might be, hey, is everything okay? They might tell you there's some things going on in their life they don't know about. They might tell you, you know what, like I recognize I've been doing that, and I know I'm not showing up great. And so just asking some questions, having some dialogue can be very helpful, and just being willing to be curious is, I think, the intention behind asking the question. But often we start to have these conversations, we have an expectation and not a clear agreement. So it's not enough to just say you need to be on time every day and believe that now this employee is going to show up every day because we told them that. It might mean, hey, an agreement often has a standard behind it, a timeline behind it, something that we both can say, this is what it means for it to be done, or this is what it means for us to meet the standard. If we can set a clear agreement, and sometimes that agreement is like, this is how it works when you do show up on time. This is what's going to happen if you don't. We've right. set a clear agreement. Often we just have an expectation of people, and we're disappointed because that's all it was. It was an expectation, and it wasn't defined clearly. Now, if someone doesn't keep that agreement, often I say I'd go back and repeat the process again. In a family, you don't fire your child, right? In a business, the agreement might be, hey, if you can't keep the standard, you can't remain part of our organization. And I've just found it's when we have clear agreements, we're not left disappointed at the end of the day, hoping or expecting our spouse, our child, a coworker to just understand something I've thought about but maybe haven't communicated or expressed.
Now, how can somebody use this language of leadership for themselves? let's say that we want to make a change. We want either there's a life change or we want to start to achieve a dream that we've been after, but we're facing some adversity. What would be the process of using that language for ourselves to be able to move past that hurdle or that block to get to the other side?
I would encourage you almost to whip out a pen and paper to do this, but just acknowledge, where am I at? Like, write out the facts in your situation just as it currently is. And once again, this isn't to beat yourself up about all the ways you haven't been the person you've wanted to be, but just to acknowledge, okay, what are the things that work? What are the things that don't? And start there. And I've always found that the more curious I get, whether it's conversation with others or with myself, if I want a better answer, sometimes that means asking a better question. So, hey, what can I do different? I mean, I love one of the first books that got my mindset changing, and this is a common one for entrepreneurs, is Rich Dad, Poor Dad. That, he talks about, instead of saying, I can't afford this, to how can I afford it? Just asking, hey, how can I do this, can change things. I love Dr. Benjamin Hardy, who, not how. So sometimes instead of asking how, who is it that can help me do this? So sometimes if we can just start asking some questions and reframe the way we look at a situation, we can recognize, okay, there's a better way to do this. And then that's where we need to make an agreement with ourselves. For me, often that agreement is creating a new affirmation or a new belief about myself. But I found that if I'm really clear on this is what I want and this is what I'm going to do, and then I hold to it, then I experience confidence. I experience growth. When I take action in that area of my life, good things happen. Doesn't mean it always goes the way I plan. Sometimes I make an agreement or with myself, or I take some action on something and I think it's going to go a certain way and it doesn't. And that doesn't mean I failed. Sometimes it just means, I've learned how it doesn't work. I've learned a new way. This isn't going to work. And I do the process again.
I like that. It doesn't mean I failed. It means I learned this doesn't work. Yes, I love that. So there's a saying out there, I don't know who said it or where it comes from, but it's never a failure as long as you learn something from it, right? So Drew, I want to ask, okay, as a coach and as a mentor, what is one piece of advice you find yourself giving repeatedly to help others to unlock their potential and overcome adversity?
We've talked about this already, and as simple as it sounds, it's believe in you. It's the first core value we have at the Abundant Man, but believe in you. And I've recognized when others have told me what they believe in me, sometimes that's what it's taken. Sometimes I don't believe enough in myself, and I got to surround myself with people that can tell me what they see in me. Often that's what it takes for me to reach new levels. And to believe in yourself, your language matters, your words matter. How you talk about yourself to you and to others creates a reality for everyone. That would be the first step. If you have an identity that believes in yourself. In fact, one of my partners, he talks about SMART goals, and I think everyone's heard SMART goals. I'm going to butcher it if I try to say all all the letters, but it's
is the S SMART?
Yeah,
the M is measurable.
M is measurable, right?
A is attainable.
Attainable.
Is
R
R
is sometimes
repeatable?
used. I've heard some people say realistic.
Realistic.
And he says, let's replace that with ridiculous.
Okay.
And so where I'm getting at with this is, and not to move the focus to SMART goals necessarily, but I'd rather have a ridiculous belief in myself and get farther than I'd ever get because I have that ridiculous belief than have a low belief in who I am and what I can accomplish and never get past that.
Right.
And so I'd rather be, on the ridiculous side of my self-belief than on the realistic side of my self-belief.
I love that, because I truly believe that, if we're striving to become better, we have to have those big, hairy, audacious goals, and we have to be working towards them, because we already know what'll happen if we don't. Why not find out what happens if we do? Right?
Yeah.
So Drew, I want to thank you so much, man, for joining us. You had a lot of pearls of wisdom today, a lot of knowledge bombs. I want to ask you to give our members, listeners, and viewers where they can find out more about you, your programs, your coaching, and all the things that you offer.
Yeah, if you want to just connect with me, You can find me on most social media platforms, The Everyday Sales Leader. I've got a website, theeverydaysalesleader.com. That's my personal website. As far as what I'm doing with my partners on helping men have abundance and reach their God-given potential, it's abundantmanproject.com. We do retreats. We offer coaching, some resources on the website. I'm not too difficult to find. If you search my name, The Everyday Sales Leader, granted, you'll find me on whatever platform you use.
Well, Drew, again, I want to thank you so much for joining us today. And I want to thank our listeners and viewers, as always, for taking the time to listen to this episode. And we're going to wrap it up like we always do. Remember to stay positive, stay persistent, and know that mindset is everything. We'll see you next time. Thank you for tuning in and being part of the Positive Persistence family. We're having a great time creating this content, and we truly hope it inspires you to embrace positivity and persistence in your own journey. If this podcast episode inspired you or entertained you, scroll down, hit those stars, and leave a comment or two. Your 5-star reviews and shares encourage us and help us grow the show. So until next time, stay positive, stay persistent, and remember, mindset is everything.